Welcome to Collective SOULversations. I'm Jody Jones, and I'm thrilled to have you join me on this amazing journey exploring spirituality, healing, and personal growth. With over 15 years of experience as a psychic medium and energy healer, I've made it my mission to help people connect with their true selves, and I can't wait to share this journey with you. In every episode, I chat with incredible guests who bring their own unique stories and insights to the table. We dive into different tools and practices that can help support you on your path of self discovery. So, whether you're just starting out or you've been in this journey for a while, Collective SOULversations is all about creating a friendly and welcoming space for us to explore the mysteries of the soul together. So, grab your favorite cup of tea, get comfy, and let's dive into this enlightening adventure together. Hey, everybody, welcome to Collective SOULversations. I am your host, Jody Jones, and I have a guest that has been on before. And so, of course, you guys know that I always bring back my favorites because 90-minute max is just not quite enough time to cover all of the territory that we tend to get into. So I'm going to give you his little bio. It's a little bio, and it's interesting because some guests come with a big bio. It's a little bio, but he's got pretty big energy. So we'll let him share and speak for himself. So I have Mr. Blaise Kennedy in the house. So Blaise is a spiritual teacher. His teachings are an integration of his own path and the experiences he has from working with his students. Where many spiritual teachings center around personal path and personal development, Blaise focuses on relationship connection and the impact of collective fields of consciousness. While Blaise teaches meditation and personal skills, he is most excited about the growing field of consciousness that is forming in his global community of students. Welcome, Blaise. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. That's my little bio. I just finished I just finished sitting with my one of my exciting growing fields of collective consciousness. So yeah, it's very much on my heart and mind right now.
Beautiful. So I know that when we last got together, and you guys should go back and find Blaise's episode because that's where we go in and we talk about how he became who he is, where he is on his journey. But we were talking about your idea of creating that community. And so tell us about, so you just obviously came out of a group session or a
Mhm.
connection with your, so tell us about what did you guys come into today? What were you holding space for?
Mm. So in the field of psychology or developmental psychology or somatic therapy, there is a concept called attachment theory, and it's a very powerful um, idea. And the basics of attachment theory is that we manage relationship and we develop strategies to manage relationships. So in the traditional vein of attachment theory, they would say we either become hyper-focused on the others, pleasing others, focusing on the relationship over ourselves, or conversely, we focus on ourselves and de-emphasize our needs, de-emphasize connection, de-emphasize relating. And this is ways that people have learned to manage. And so in the group that I'm sitting with, what I witnessed and what we are really sharing is how we're all coming out of that. We're all coming out of that strategy into a new way of being, an inclusive, mature, not so reactive strategy, a way of being with all parts of life and not having to sacrifice one for the other. So it means if someone you know is struggling, that you can hold that without pushing it away or having to sacrifice yourself, or you can mediate conflict in the world and in yourself by slowing down and holding all parts. So what happened specifically in the group today is somebody came with a question about this, and what I witnessed is that I didn't answer it directly. We all just took turns sharing our relationship with how to care for others and care for ourselves at the same time. And the more people talked, the more everyone just fell into this very bright, very open space where we can hold the challenges of life also notice that everything is okay at the same time. So this one person summarized it really well as they said, when I often come with my efforts to fix things or to do the right thing, but when I relax and when I expand, there is so much resource beyond my personal effort. And we're learning how to channel and relax into these larger resources so that our personal actions don't have the same limitations and um, the same choosing between things, the same separation as we're used to. So it's just really exciting just to watch a group of people who have developed a skill set over time, share their capacity and their maturity and their wisdom together. And this is what separates my community from what I traditionally know as spiritual teachers, which is we are all growing together. It is our community is the sum total, the sum capacity of all of us. And while I teach and I share, like I'm going to talk today, everyone contributes, everyone has something to offer. And just as a group experience, it's just so exciting that everyone gets to be celebrated and everyone gets to be supported and everyone's journey matters and is important. It just leaves us with such a sense of we're all in it together, we're all moving in the same direction, and every part of life, every person's experience is contributing to that. So
Yeah,
that's
that's very very interesting. So like the whole, unity concept, right, of coming into it, let you expand on a little bit on this because as you were talking, of course, spirit was, showing me aspects of it. And so do you feel like part of the, and I know this is for all souls that are on the ascension journey, is we have to, we come in with these kind of like these personalities or these profiles or these, templates that we step into. One of them being an empath, another being a narcissist. And when you talk about relationships, those are the kind of the two, you know, labels that really kind of dictate our, our experiences for sure. Is that something that you guys kind of talk to? Because I it feels like whoever's in your group right now, you guys have reached like a level of completion of being able to put those personalities aside, right, and be able to be in that free kind of free flowing space. But do you guys explore those aspects within, especially when it comes to relationships?
I mean, absolutely. All of that, all of those strategies or those imprints or what templates or whatever you call them, really are are our, or I should say, our ability to live and be an expression of unity consciousness is really challenged by the limited imprints and strategies that we have. So when you open up to higher levels of consciousness and fields that feel quite unified, you then have to figure out, like in my personality structure and my body and my consciousness, there are going to be all these places that aren't really aligned with that. And so I wouldn't say that it's like a light switch. It's a progressive moving more in line with the higher truth of the universe. And so these imprints, where they come from, where we get these imprints or templates can be quite broad. They can resonate or echo through many parts of our development. And in learning how to track and recognize where those imprints come from, we get to tell their story. I mean, they all have a function. They're all
Mm.
born out of the intelligence of the universe. There is no bad strategy. And as a result, I don't tend to use as accurate and as resonant as those phrases can be, like narcissist and empath, or conversely, being avoidant attachment or being ambivalent attachment. Or I tend not to use those labels because what I find is when we really look inside ourselves, we've quite a mishmash of strategies.
Right.
And instead of labeling people directly, I try my best to speak to the principles and allow people to see really that they have a diversity inside themselves. But within
Yeah, and I
myself,
think that's great. But they're all, everybody is kind of, there's so many different levels to awakening, to healing, to ascension. And for somebody who's kind of maybe just new on this path or new on the journey, who's, newly waking up, they may still identify with that terminology. Do you know what I mean? Like, I fully can grasp the concept that you're explaining, and the like, this is where we want to be. We want to be in a place where we're in non-judgment, that's the non-duality. Like, I understand that. But help our listeners. So if you're somebody who's listening and you're kind of new on the path, because the new age spiritual world, the spirituality, it can be really high. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It can go over a lot of people's heads.
Hmm.
So for those listeners who are, still identifying with as an empath or as a narcissist, or recognizing there's a narcissist in a relationship, or recognizing there's an
Hmm.
empath in a relationship, what's their first step into this?
Well, first off, I wouldn't talk anybody out of those labels or ways of identifying themselves. I'm more speaking from my position as a teacher. I don't suggest those just as a way that I hold my community. I think if you identify or resonate with any of those concepts, it's a very powerful tool in
Right.
identifying patterns that are happening in your life and making changes. So it's the same as when I was in my early 20s, I was identified as an addict. And that I wouldn't call myself an addict, but at the time, it's really clear. If you are an addict, then you take these steps and then you improve your life. And so it's really helpful to diagnose yourself if you then have a means to action. Okay, so
Right.
the question is, if you diagnose yourself as being an empath or as being a narcissist or having attachment issues, what do you what do you do? Well,
Hmm.
there's many ways to look at this. What I would emphasize, if we're following up from the group that I'm saying, is the in consciousness, there are very stable fields of relationship. There are places where we can be connected and not have to do very much. Meaning, if we pull away and think of ourselves, oh, the relationship is stable. If we become hyper focused, oh, turns out we don't have to fix anything. Another way of saying that is when we are feeling connected and there's a sense of well being or resource that's greater than our effort, we can relax. So I would describe the world as, generally speaking, as under-resourced in some sort of state of crisis or emergency a lot of the time. So as we live in the world, we need strategies to manage that. Taking care of ourselves or taking care of other people, they're very powerful strategies that help us in a crisis or a trauma-based situation. So when we are in relationship, when we are in contact with people where that's not needed, we get this beautiful contrast. We go, oh, this is how I've learned to be, but actually right now it's not necessary. I don't have to protect myself. I don't have to leave myself. I don't have to do that. So this is one of the main things is to be around people, whether it's a therapist or anyone else, where there is enough safety and enough connection that you don't have to do what you normally do. So most of the strategies that people have of being an empath or a narcissist, where they really kick in, is in conflict or in stress or in relationships where there's a lot of stuff. So I invite people to step out of that normal functioning and come into a spiritual practice and in relationship with me or any of the other people I work with, where there's no crisis. We're not fixing anything. We're just being together and we're just looking. So when we are exposed to that experience progressively over time, we learn to relax. We learn to recognize our strategies as being just that, they're strategies. Being a narcissist is not the fullness of who you are. It's not the depth of your being. It's just something that you do, right? Whatever it is. And it becomes possible to see that, identify it, and to share it with people in a way that doesn't is non-threatening. So that trust and ability to just be with the strategies of our life or the trauma of our life, again, when there is safety, when we're not in a hurry, I find that to be really of great benefit.
Yeah,
So
for
that would be the
sure.
first thing I say. So if we are in a relationship or in a pattern of life, we just can't break out of that. My experience, it's very hard to do that while I am in the same stressful situation that triggers me. That's a tough place to reinvent yourself and to let go of the strategies that keep you safe. So a big part of what I'm looking to do in the world is to create a practice space, a space outside of the normal pressures of the world where you can reassess your life strategies, see deeply what is happening and present for you, and learn how to do something different. So when there is stress, our system doesn't think to itself,
Right.
"Oh, I better slow down and see what other possibilities are available." When there's stress or when there's pressure, when there's trauma, we speed up, we become reactive, we do
Right.
what we have always done. That's normal. That's a protective mechanism. So if we take those same scenarios and those same patterns and we place them in a connection or a space or a presence that isn't needing anything, it's not needing to do anything, where there is care, again, our system will reevaluate itself. And it'll go
Right.
from reacting
Hmm.
to presencing and processing our life.
Right. And so you're saying that you guys can do this in community because like you've just come together in the group scenario to do that. And I feel like the idea that you're making is that like we need to come into that place of connection. There needs to be that connection, that safety created. So again, if you were somebody who is kind of been struggling with this or it's new to you, what are some of the steps that we can do? Because maybe you don't agree on this, but I've always been taught and learned through trial and error that I need to be my safe space. I can't have a safe space to go to. I can't go to a retreat when I'm feeling stressed. I
Yeah.
can't go to my therapist when I'm feeling. I need to be able to come to my safe space. And so, do you agree that that needs to be priority? And if you do or don't, let me know if you don't agree. But if it is, how do we get there? Is it done through the
Yeah.
mind, through the body? Are there actions that we take? How does this work?
I think it's a great question. People ask me this all the time. So they'll come to a group and everything will work really well when there's connection or relationship. And they'll ask me, like, how do I do this on my own? And so I believe there's a need both for personal development and skills and capacity and for um, a sangha, a connection, a relational feel. So the way I would describe this is through human development. So in children, there is no independent well-being. There is no child who can be well in and of themselves. As we grow up in a world that is not well, we need to develop personal capacity. And for some people who have, I would count myself in this, who have a strong sort of spiritual motivation, that may be very possible. They may very well be able to, through their own efforts, create a lot of capacity. And historically, I see a tremendous need for this. So that is a thing. It is absolutely a real thing that I validate, that if you have a strong will or a strong drive, or you have deep inner resources, whether in your soul or in many other parts of consciousness, you can create that for yourself. And if you look at the history of spiritual teachers in the 20th century, it's a mess. Groups that claim to be, for the betterment of the world often end up having tremendous shadows. I think there's a lot of reason to say it's not possible to rely on other people. And I think that the world and the potential is changing. And so in my experience, it is possible to do a lot of the developmental work that is needed in relationship with a therapist, with a coach, with a group of people. And it's not the case for me that supersedes personal development.
Right.
It creates and supports personal development. Just like a loving parent doesn't mold the child. A loving parent supports the child to be the best version of themselves. If a child feels
Mm-hmm.
safe and they have these imprints early in life, then they become a resource capable child. So I would emphasize the fact that all human well-being is at some level interrelated. All of the subtle dimensions of consciousness have one thing in common, is that they are fields of interrelatedness, that we are by nature interrelated. And I think I have experienced over the time that I'm teaching uh, that it's possible to safely lean into interdependence and interrelatedness as a way of creating capacity in individuals and in collectives. And it's my job to identify the places in which that isn't true and or where there are problems and to correct them. That's my sort of mission. So for the individual, I think about listeners, I think about where I was in my spiritual path. That might not even be appealing to people. They might
Right.
want to go out on their own. For me, for a long time, I had a lot of personal motivation. I didn't think that I was going to get a lot from other people, and I worked really hard on my own, and I would say that it worked quite well. So,
Hmm.
for many people, that might not be something that appeals to them. And for others, I find that they try it, they lean into someone and go, actually, having another person care with me really supports me.
Hmm.
And so, I would suggest that, there are many spiritual communities out there, and I, I'm not here to review all of them, but ones that really understand human development and trauma and attachment and all of the challenges that come up in a relationship are probably most likely to help you navigate those challenges for yourself. There are many spiritual communities that sort of deny or look beyond all of those very challenging parts of human nature.
Hmm.
And I tend to be less confident in their ability to navigate all the stuff that comes up between us, because
Right.
there's stuff that comes up between us everywhere.
Right. Yes. And that's, I mean, of course, that's the thing when you're going in and you're doing the work on yourself and you're doing the journey. Part of finding your community or your teacher or your guide, I feel like is also, you're tuning into your intuition again, stepping back into your gifts so that you find a teacher that resonates with you on a vibrational frequency. So
Yeah.
meaning this is somebody who is a few steps ahead of you. And here's the thing that I think, and I've seen this with my own clients before, is that if you go to somebody for support, for teaching, for guidance, and you put them on such a pedestal, you're going to be incredibly disappointed at some point because the purpose of you finding a guide or a teacher or a guru is so that you can follow the path. But at some point you will find, and you should find, that you are on level ground with the teacher, with the guide, with the guru, and then that's when you go on to the next person. But I feel like what happens is when we're searching for that, that level of support, we often, and see if you agree with this, when we're doing this, usually doing it in a time of need, right? When somebody's seeking you out, it's usually in a time when their judgment is very clouded, their clarity is not there, right? They're usually in a, people don't come and see, find people like you when they're doing amazing. they, they find somebody like you when they're needing that hand up, right? They're needing that little bit of extra support. And so, do you feel like that's a big, do you feel it's like a trial and error thing that we have to go through all these different teachers to get the little bits and pieces? Or do you feel like that is an important part of the journey? Or what would be your advice if somebody was saying, you know what, I feel like I do need some extra support. I don't think I can do this on my own, or I don't know how to do it on my own. How would you guide them and direct them on that?
Yeah, again, I think it's a fabulous question. I just feel tender when I hear you talk about the people are coming in need. Again, in my time, I've heard, I've spent a lot of time hearing seekers who've had bad experiences in the way that you describe, so much of it in the
Mm-hmm.
last century. And I would really like to think that it's changing. I really believe that there is a possibility for change, and this is what I strive to in my own life. I think when I look at what a guru teacher is in the 20th century, it's that there was a tremendous scarcity of like awakened beings or beings that had breakthroughs. And so we celebrated anybody who had some level of breakthrough, they were kind of like rock stars. They were
Right.
special. They were different. And what I see now is that the breakthroughs are happening much more broadly, and it is inherently sort of solving some of that division between the teacher who's realized and the student who's seeking realization.
Mm.
When breakthroughs become easier and easier, as I see them happening, then it puts less power. The teacher has less power.
Right.
They're holding a resource that's not as scarce, that there's an
Right.
abundance of actually what we're all seeking. And so we can
Right.
close that gap for people from this person, this teacher has something I don't have, to actually, I get at least some of what they're talking about. And now they don't, like, that takes away that comparison and the charge and the specialness and the need that we project, or that they
Hmm.
project on us. So I would like to think that through the evolution of consciousness, I believe that, I see that through the evolution of consciousness, a lot of that is actually being resolved. And in this, if you ask me, like, what is a teacher's job? It's not to shine a light on themselves, it's to shine a light on you. The job is that when I work with people, when I see people, they see themselves more and I see them more. So
Hmm.
the measure of when someone does well is if they have more self-knowledge and more connection to themselves and more experience. It's not that they repeat what I say
Right.
or they hold my philosophy. My job is to empower them. And so if it works, the balance of power should change, right?
Right.
That's what,
Yes.
and if it's not, I would say then there's something that I am doing or there's something that we are doing that's not working.
Right.
I would
Yes.
look to remedy that, and I would hope that the student or client would um, also look to remedy that in themselves.
Yeah. And I mean, and the teachings have to stick in a certain way. So just as an example, and maybe you've had this experience where you go and you see somebody, a guide, a guru, a teacher, and during that 45 minutes or an hour that you're with them, you feel great. Your mind goes out of the problem that you came in there with. Your body feels different, energetically the space feels different. And then you get off the call, you finish the meeting, and then very quickly, you go right back into the energetic space that you were prior to that session with them. So, my belief is that when we show up and we hold space for these people, and this is for anybody that's working with anybody out there, a coach, a guru, a teacher, this is spirit always says to me, the proof is in the pudding. So when you're going to somebody and you're going to them for this issue, this problem, this guidance, whatever it is, there should be a significant shift in your energy field, meaning that when you leave the call, you feel different. There's some different thoughts, some different emotions, some different perspectives, and that kind of stays with you. Do you think that does that make sense to you?
Yes, and I would also one thing that just amazes me about being a teacher, I, I get to just observe people all day long. It's the most wonderful blessing. And
Right.
what I have recognized is there's so much diversity in consciousness and in the human experience.
Yes.
So when people come to me, the changes that occur, the things that we actually talk about, where they are heading is so broad. And I sit with people who, like, what the changes are that occur in them uh, are not universal. I
Right.
wouldn't I would say there probably are markers that are universal. So
Hmm.
it would be hard to say this specific thing should change as a
Right.
sign
Right.
that
Yeah,
you
it's not a
are.
one size fits all. Everybody is going to be very unique. Yeah.
But if someone comes to me and they are looking for something, I mean, they should get what they're looking for. How
Right.
long that takes or what the journey is, we discover that together.
Right.
I think
Yes.
of people like uh, who have a lot of unexpressed and unfelt pain. I can't tell them that if that's what we're going to do is we're going to feel the pain that they carry. I can't tell them that when the pain will stop or
Right.
how much sadness there's going to be. We can't make that promise. What I can tell you is that if you keep releasing this, there will be very clear changes in the way you feel, the way you orient to life, the way you rest in your body, the way you relate to your family and to your ancestors. And we're looking for those changes.
Right.
Like we need to know that we need to know that things are changing in a positive way in your life to orient to the fact that this is working. And if it's not, then we need to really reevaluate what we're what we are doing. So again, this is my view is when you buy a book from a teacher or you learn a method or you become a Buddhist and you're going to move through the levels, often spirituality is taught as a kind of a universal path. You're going to do this, and then you're going to do this, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do this. And I don't think that serves people as well as a unique path. This is your path.
Right.
And helping students, whatever clients, to map out this is where you are, this is where you're going, this is what's going to happen, this is what's happening along the way, and these are the positive changes. That's unique for every single person. And I believe people need a personalized developmental map, not a universal one. Because the things that
Right.
you were telling me about yourself, like when before we were on the call, you're saying like, oh, I have these experiences, and immediately I'm like, I'm orienting to your path, not the path, but
Right.
your path. And
Right.
I learn about your path, not because I know everybody's path and I know everything about everybody, and I'm here to
Well, and
tell you about
certainly
you.
if you get somebody like me who shows up as a client for you, Blaise, you're as a teacher, you're really going to be like, okay, so I don't see this type of energy field all of the time. I don't see this. So
It's
yeah,
happening to me. It's
yeah,
happening to me all the time.
yes,
And I
yes,
can't like I'm learning. I don't know
right,
their path.
right,
I have no idea. I can't tell them what it is. What I can do is I can sit with them and I can map it out with them and we can learn together.
right,
So another thing is I am not a God on a mountain handing out, abundance to people.
right,
I am learning about my universe through you.
yeah,
This is my direct experience.
yeah,
And so I have, yes, I'm teaching and I have a certain role and I have a capacity and I have a facility, but I make it clear to everyone like that in my lived experience, like I'm getting a lot out
yeah.
of learning from you rather
And that's
than,
so important because in this day and age, the spirit calls it all the time. It's the smoke and mirrors day. And this is what we live in, is smoke and mirrors. You go on any social media platform and there'll be hundreds, thousands of teachers, guides, coaches, gurus on there, standing on the pedestal, preaching their, and I honestly feel like there's not enough of us who come out and be raw and real and who are like when I got on the call with Blaise today, we do the how are you, how's exchanging our pleasantries. And I, was completely, I said, to be honest with you, I'm having a rough day today. This is a energetically, this will air on the Friday, but we're doing it on the Wednesday. We have some major geostorm weather, some solar flares happening. And so I happen to be energetically sensitive to these things. And my physical body interprets it in a certain way that's not the easiest to navigate at times. But I have, for a very long time now, because I learned this lesson the hard way, when I show up for my clients, when I show up for my followers, when I show up on my platforms, I show up in the realness of it. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like there's not enough of us who show up in the way of, yeah, you know what? I'm feeling really shitty today, and this is because of this. But I do have an entire toolbox of things that I know how to use that I can go into. And so instead of getting stuck on, the human aspect or the human suffering of it, I do have a way out. I do have, but I feel like it's important there. And I got to bring this up because they just keep on saying to me, and if I don't bring it up, they're not going to stop. Take us through what you feel about spiritual bypassing, what spiritual bypassing is, and how, and any experience or insights you have about that.
yeah. Um, yeah, where to start?
And I feel like that's what they're giving me the example. So, meaning, as if I come in and I talk about whatever, you come in and you talk about, if we go back and look at your story, we know that there was addictions issues. We know that there was the depression. So when we come up with that stuff, and also with the idea of that, You know, and I had an interesting conversation with a colleague about this the other day because they're a medical medium follower, and they're very, I don't know if you're familiar with Anthony William, but the medical medium community is a beautiful community, but that's a tough community. Like they're, these are the rules. This is how you do it. There's no, you don't do this. There's a lot of that. And I had this conversation with a friend when I was saying, because he was having a day that wasn't great. He was having some flares, and I was trying to be from a bigger perspective and saying, there will never be a time where anybody ever feels 100% for 100% of the time. It's just not achievable in the human form. Does this mean that you're always going to be sick? No. But does it mean that you're always going to maybe not be exactly where you want to be? Yes, that's most likely. And he was very much like, well, no, I can't show up if I'm not, and I'm going to be 100%. I'm going to get, and I could just feel like the ego energy coming in. And so I pulled back because of course you can't teach ego, right? So I pulled back and just kind of held space around it. But I feel like that might be an aspect of the spiritual bypassing. Do you know what I mean? It's like that kind of like untouchable. I can go over this. Yeah, that point over there. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like there's a lot of that that goes on in the spiritual community.
We talked about attachment strategies. We talked about narcissist versus uh, empath. These strategies that we have, this like divided approach to how we deal with relationship and how we deal with life. And I would put spiritual bypassing for me is like one half of a strategy. One half of a strategy is to overemphasize the parts of life that are unchanging or are okay already or are that don't need transformation. Another strategy would be to like get in there and fix it and try to improve it and and um and dig and be really in the content or push through in all these kinds of ways. So for me, both, it's not that I pick one or the other, is
Mm-hmm.
they are both essential elements of life. I'll try to put this in other words. So all of the higher states of well-being that may feel effortless or may feel like change does not need to occur, those are really important.
Right.
Those are not a way out of life. Those are the capacities or the truths that allow you to be with the fact that life is continuously in transformation. There is continuous difficulty and challenge here on Earth.
Right.
I wouldn't pick one of those two realities over the other. I think they're actually meant to come together. They are a unity in and of
Mm-hmm.
themselves. And it's very hard for people, like if you read non-dual teachings especially, it's very hard to describe that unity, and it's very hard for people to imagine that. How can it be true that life is suffering and yet you can be free of suffering? Like how
Right.
do those both be true? So the only way they can imagine it is like, well, I will just never suffer again. I guess that's what it means to not suffer, is to be
Right.
free of suffering, is to never suffer and never have pain.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite, teachers from when I was first starting is Krishnamurti, and he would say two things back to back. He'd say, first, he would talk about what was happening in the world, and he'd say, I weep about it. I weep about what is happening in the world. And then he would turn around in the next sentence and say, I don't really mind what happens. It's like,
Right.
how can both of those things be true? What he was
Mm-hmm.
referring to when he says, I don't mind what happened, he's including his weeping, he's including his sadness, he's including his humanity in that.
Right.
So
Right.
for him, it's a very integrated experience of the rawness of being here and the transcendent and the higher dimensions of reality. And he doesn't
Mm-hmm.
choose between them anymore.
Right.
He accepts that they fit together. And so in our
Right.
journey, we're going to be bouncing it back and between those two things. We'll get too mired in the difficulty and we'll forget the broader perspectives. And at other times, we'll be, oh, just everything's okay. And then go, whoops, actually, I'm not dealing with this element of life. And there are many spiritual traditions or psychological traditions which will encourage that. Like they will overemphasize one, and so then they'll create a teaching and a community that I don't think has a very healthy balance of these two qualities of life. So
Right.
again, my job is to my impulse is like it's to show people how all of these elements of life actually are one. They're all part of life. They are all to be taken on. You can't you can't just wash them away. There's no non-dual reality that's going to pay your phone bill for you. There's
Right.
no non-dual reality that's going to help you resolve the conflict that you have with your spouse or your wife or a physical health challenge. Non-dual realities or whatever realization you have is going to put the challenge you have in context. And they're going to give you a tremendous amount of access to life to do the healing work and the relational work and the participation that is needed. It's going to give you the power to participate in life rather than the power to uh, avoid life.
Right. To
Awakening is
bypass
not
it.
going to help
Yeah.
you avoid life. And if
Right.
you think that it is, you are going to get stuck and at some
Right.
point.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. It's funny that the language that you use when you're talking, because obviously it's, there's a little bit of influence of the teachers that you've had in the books that you've had and all of that. And my husband and we've been married for 23 years, and we have numerous very, very interesting deep conversations about things. And so he always goes back to the old school teachings. He always goes back to the non-duality, to the, very much the, the teachings of teachers like Muji, you know what
Hmm.
I mean, like that kind of. And I always find myself playing the devil's advocate in it, because it's true. It's not always an easy, I know it, that place of in the middle is the best place to be. That neutral place in any aspect of anything is always the easiest place to be, but it's not always easy to get there, right? That's again, when I talk about the all the different aspects of who we are and all the different templates that we have, they kind of dictate how easy it is for us to keep our tires on the road, right?
Yeah. Muji is a great example. Muji emphasizes really one one or two primary things, and it reflects his path. Like
Hmm.
he came about that wisdom because that happened to him.
Right.
That doesn't mean that's what's going to happen to you. Just because it happened to Muji, and that's what Muji emphasizes, doesn't mean that's what you should be doing. So when I work with people, for so many reasons, whether it's in their human conditioning, whether it's in their soul, whether it's in the you could call it their guides or what they have access to within the universe, the things, the challenges that they are going to have are unique. Answers they're going to need to come up with those challenges are unique. The parts of consciousness that are going to be really available to them are unique. And our job is to show people, or my job is to show people a map of as many different parts of life as possible so that they can feel what's actually aligned for them. Like, hey, there are all these aspects of life. Like, for example, early childhood development and trauma. I say, look, this is what I know about it. This is how it works. I can show you it. And then you can decide whether that's something that you need to focus on or not. How do you know you need to focus on it? Because you feel that you do. Because you look inside yourself and you say, wow, I have a lot to do here. It really is resonant for me.
Right.
I can also show you the incarnational pathway or awareness or some other quality of consciousness, which may not even be relevant to you right now. It may be later. You might go, oh, it's actually just this piece that I feel really called to focus on. So in 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 response to Muji and all of the other non-dual teachers, what I really aspire to do is to create as broad a curriculum as possible that each person can choose those elements for themselves. Because you may hear what Muji's saying, you may do self-inquiry and find that it blows your socks off, just like it did him, just like it did many, many people, and that it creates a developmental path which is radically transformative for you. If that
Hmm.
happens, I say you should do that, at least for
Right.
now. If it
Right.
doesn't, then we'll figure out what does really sort of turn you on or work for you. And instead of thinking those as being like, oh, there's better teachings and there's lesser teachings, it's for me, that doesn't mean anything. What matters is like what really works for you, what is actually aligned with your path,
Hmm.
do that. And often we find that when people don't have a lot of, I would say, when people don't have a broad connection to themselves and are not really able to recognize what's happening, it's very easy to misuse non-dual teachings to cover over for things that they don't really recognize happening in
Right.
themselves. And
Right.
that's a missed opportunity. For me, that's a
Right.
missed opportunity. And it creates a culture where people aren't really sure what's happening. For me, it's really important that when somebody says, like, I feel really angry, instead of saying like, anger doesn't help anybody, just let go of that. Like that we can see like what is that? Like what is the anger that lives in you? Instead of using a spiritual teaching to fix it, we
Hmm.
learn to relate to people uniquely and see them. And when we see them, they get to know themselves rather than having a teaching that they use to relate to their life. We don't use teachings to relate to our life. We use skills to know ourselves. That's the difference that I would make.
Right. And do you feel like, and I mean, I'm sure with all of the people that you work with and that you've experienced yourself, do you find that there's a lot who, because there's a certain type of person that goes into the spiritual journey. Like there's really a certain type of soul. And most of the time it's somebody who's really seeking, like really somebody who's doing the deep dive, really, takes all the books, takes all the classes, does watches all the stuff. And I feel like what can happen sometimes is there's a lost sense of identity when you do that. So you almost become all of these, aspects of the teachers and the books and and it's very interesting when I meet somebody like that because energetically there's not a lot of soul depth to them when you read their energy. You can, in their atmospheric space there's a ton of depth to it, but on the inside there's not a lot. What do you recommend if we are, if we're doing this to ultimately, and let me, and maybe your view is different than mine. What do you think we're ultimately doing this for? Like what do we do all of this for? What's the purpose of finding a teacher and a guide and a guru?
Yeah, well, that's a couple questions. Let's take the first one. So what do you do when people come to you and they have a lot of spiritual knowledge? How do you relate to that? I don't have a lot of problem with that because I don't ask people a lot what they think. I ask them how they feel. And energy doesn't
So
lie.
important. That's
And
huge.
so when people are relating to me, I'm going to ask you how you feel. And
Right.
I'm going to focus on how you feel. And I'm going to look at how you feel. That's where we're going to meet. And so I
If
would just say,
anybody's
I don't
listening,
think
this
those
is this is a
people,
really good, that's a, I have to say this. This is, if you're going to go see somebody and they're giving you this kind of verbiage that's the person you want to go see.
if
You want
someone,
the person,
if
yeah, that
someone
says I
says,
want to feel you. I want to feel, I don't want to hear you. I don't want to see what's in your head. I want to feel you for
if
sure.
someone says, if their felt sense truth is there is no self, then I will feel that with you.
Right.
Absolutely. We can feel that all day long. But
Right.
if you say that and you are not really here,
Yes.
like then we're going to meet you where you actually are. We're going to meet you
Right.
here. So I don't think I have a lot of people come to me. I don't have a lot of people come to me who do that because that's not what I'm selling.
Right.
I think the thing that I emphasize with people is um, one of the primary teachings. If you ask, like, what do I teach? It's an integration of our thinking, our emotions, and our sensations. This is the primary skill set. This is how we do the work.
Hmm.
Is when I say things, I feel them. And when I feel things, I say them. I learn to align what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling. That's our language. That's how we communicate. That's how we relate.
Hmm.
So that brings us from like what we think about life to what's actually happening for us now. There's just no way around what's actually happening now.
Right. Right.
And this skill set develops from there. Now, what do we do with all this stuff that we feel? How
Right.
do we relate to that?
Yeah.
It's not about choosing the content or telling you what the best content is or what's the most important thing to be feeling or knowing. It's what are you actually feeling and knowing? So that's the
Mm-hmm.
first thing. And then your question is like, why are we here? Um, what a what a big question.
Right.
I would ask again, I would ask why why are you here? Let's find out. Like, okay, where are we going to find that answer? Where inside of you, the person I'm sitting, where are we going to find that answer? Well, we're going to find it in the motivation in your thoughts, feelings, and sensations. We're going to find that in the felt sense of your body as sort of like a raw desire or care. Dealing with pain, feeling more connected to people, uh, feeling healthy, having physical health, doing something, fulfilling a desire, fulfilling a dream. I mean, it could be so many things. That's one aspect. We can also find your motivation in your soul or the incarnational light that arrives as you. So this means for me, soul has a kind of a direction. It's where you are coming from and what you are coming with and where you are going to. So again, we feel, this is something that we feel, we learn to feel and relate to. We read this as a direction to life. And so we discover this purpose, the purpose of our life, the purpose of incarnation through our soul. And I support people to do that and then to embody it and then to relate from it and then to navigate from that quality. And it's a very, very rich and expansive experience having a soul or having light. And then the third thing that I would say is that we are at some level, many people, probably at everybody, but some people are particularly driven to know the nature of reality. They want to find the like, the one truth, the thing, the source, the answer, the
Right.
ultimate. And often they can't put it into words.
Right.
It's just this drive that needs to be satiated. And for them, uh, I would support them to know that path as well. So within that, those are the three things that I would suggest. The diversity, again, is extraordinary. My wife has such a strong drive to be a mother. So if we ask like, what is she doing here? That's a that's a big part of it. If
Mm-hmm.
she doesn't so strongly or doesn't have a dominant experience of just needing to know the nature of reality, is that a problem? No, it's just not a problem.
Right.
What do you want to do and how do we help you to do it? If you're more like me and you have, as you develop a lot of pain and you have a deep desire to process that and to lighten yourself on so many levels, then fill your boots. Let's feel all that and lighten it and move through it. And what
Mm-hmm.
happens is as you fulfill one aspect of your life purpose, or as you become competent in one aspect of your life purpose, you're well on your way and you grow through it and you mature, you very well may expand in your purposes and motivations. It may get broader. It may turn to something else. So we just figure out what it is for you
Mm-hmm.
and then uh, move from there.
Yeah, and that's such a perfect segue because as you were talking, of course, they were prompting me to then ask about the purpose changing. So, and this is very interesting because I feel like the more work that we do, we realize the impermanence of things, and we start to be okay with that. That's actually like a good thing. When we know that something's not going to be there forever, it's not going to stay the same forever. That becomes a very powerful tool for us with the healing. And just for, to imagine wherever you are in your life, wherever you feel like your purpose is right now, and maybe your purpose is very difficult, it's very challenging, whatever, or maybe it's beautiful and it's glorious. But just to know that this purpose can change like this, and then it becomes another purpose, right? I mean, once upon a time, my sole purpose was to be a mother. So I can very much relate with your wife. That was, being a mother and nurturing and creating a family, and that was my purpose. Nothing else existed out of that. If somebody would have said to me back when my babies were all babies, well, you know what, you're going to be doing this later, I would have been, you're crazy because this is my
Yeah.
life,
Yeah.
right? But purpose does change, right? That's part of the evolution, and how should we, if we find ourselves, and maybe this is a better question, how can you know if you're in whatever you're in right now is not your purpose? How can you be sure that that's not your purpose and that you should be searching or seeking or opening up to a different purpose?
Yeah, well, I'll give you the spiritual answer first. The that could be used as a bypass, but I think is ultimately true is wherever you are, that's where you should be because that's where you are. And I think that that's true. So first, before we fix it, I really invite people to be where they are. So if we are confused, uh, slow down and feel that more. Don't move away from it. You got to feel it more. So even whether you're in the right place or you're not, the action's actually going to be pretty similar.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to feel it more. You're going to explore it more. You're going to discover it more. And that's going to either correct or develop it anyways. For me, I can only sort of say for myself, I had this innate sense for most of my life, for the first 24 years of my life, like I just wasn't doing it. Like I just wasn't showing up. I just didn't, I didn't stand for anything. But I couldn't compare that to anything else. It was like an emptiness or a shallowness that knew no comparison. So it's only once I figured out like what I felt something different. I felt a strong sense of purpose and direction and comfort with that,
Right.
that I could recognize how lost I had been. So how do you know that you're lost or that you're not where you're supposed to be? Or how do you remedy that? Again, this is where teachers and peers are really helpful. Be around people who are different than that.
Mm-hmm.
Be around people who are driven, who have a strong sense of purpose, who have been through a lot of transformation, who have had challenges and grown through them. Have experiences of people who reflect something to you that you do not know. Because when
Mm-hmm.
people reflect something that is different or more developed, or as you're saying, like further along than you, even if it's just a little bit, it gives you some context for your experience.
Right.
You go, actually, now that I see you, oh wow, you love your job. Suddenly I'm thinking like, why don't I love my job? Before that, I just thought no one loved their job. I thought that
Right.
was normal. So that's what I really invite. Explore your world
Yeah.
and explore yourself.
Right. For sure. And do you feel like, because sometimes, when I'm doing readings for clients, and this is just psychic readings, um, and of course they'll want to know like what's in my future. Is this job going to be? Is this going to
Yeah.
be? And it's very interesting because sometimes they will very clearly show that there's a path that's open, right? They'll
Yeah.
show there's a
Yeah.
trajectory. This is like if you continue in the vibrational field, thoughts, motions, actions that you're in now, this is where you could be. But there is a lot of time, and I'm going to say probably more time, where it just feels like there's a whole bunch of empty space around them. And this is funny because people don't like to hear that. But when you say, well, actually, there's, and spirit will call it a holding pattern. And so to me, that just means that energetically, they're just in one place right now. They're kind of like anchored a little bit. There's not a lot of growth, a lot of movement, a lot of change happening. And here's the thing that is the pivotal change in this. It's your perception of this experience. So if we go back to the teachings of the, non-duality teachings of like, you know, anywhere you go, you are there, right? That being of it. And no matter where you are meant to be where you are, having that okayness with it. It's hard for people to get into that little nugget and that little alignment with, okay, I'm here. This is where I am. It's the saying, and my husband would use the saying all the time. It would piss me off and piss me, but it is what it is. It is what it is. That kind of. So, what would you suggest to somebody who's in a holding pattern energetically, like they're just not feeling it, they're not feeling the motivation to go, they're not feeling a sense of purpose, they're not
Yeah.
feeling what's your guidance on that?
Yeah. So again, we're trying to speak together the non-dual teachings that are not flat, that invite a diversity of life and a tremendous depth of experience rather than a flat unity. So I can say on one hand, you are where you are, and that's where you are supposed to be. This is true for me. It's a universal principle. And then I could say conversely that most people actually aren't very present to where they are. They're
That's a
not
great
really
point. Yes.
actually where they are.
Right.
So even if we say like you are where you are, you can be more where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are more where you are, this blank space or this vagueness or this numbness or this unclarity will open and there will be more of you in it. And then you have more to work with. So
Right.
again, how would you know that you're not connected to yourself? It's very hard to recognize that
Mm-hmm.
until you are in the presence of someone who is inviting you into deeper connection with yourself. When you are invited into deeper connection with yourself, then you go, oh, actually, there's more here than I thought. And you can train and support people to learn how to find more within themselves. You can give them directions,
Mm-hmm.
not in what they're going to find, but actually how they come more into their body, they come more into their ancestry, into their family, and come more into their soul. And what they find there, again, that's unique to them. But
Mm-hmm.
that content, that experience, that's what gives you direction. That's what makes life meaningful and purposeful. And I think that content is extremely important. So you are where you are. There is this just perfection, and you could be you could be ever more there.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love the way you, and I hope you guys have got that. I hope that when he said that to you, you literally envisioned yourself being there, but not being there. And just to give you guys an example, this was years ago, back in 2010, when I kind of was like pushed into my awakening. And I was having a lot of physical stuff come up, and I was seeing all kinds of doctors and guides and gurus and everybody. And I was with a really gifted clairvoyant medical intuitive at the time, actually. And I was sitting in his office, and we were talking, like we were just close, face to face talking. And he kept looking over to the far side of the room. And I would say to him, what are you looking at? And he was like, well, your physical body's here, but your soul keeps literally leaving the body and going across the room. And I feel like that happens for a lot of people and you don't even realize it, right? There's just that disconnect energetically that happens. And it wasn't until I started to do the real work, like the real work of like the connection with myself, with that, again, that until my soul began to feel comfortable in my human avatar and could stay
Yeah.
anchored in it, right? So I hope you guys get that point, that even where you are in that place that feels like you're stuck or it's not your purpose, how much of you is actually in that space, right?
Beautiful. So we're doing these wonderful circles. One of the things you asked me earlier is like, um, Blaise, it's about personal capacity, connection to yourself. Like, what about the group and the field? What do you say about personal, your personal journey and your personal effort and knowing yourself versus the field? I think that's a great example of how people who are very embodied and developed can help you to know yourself. Again, the purpose, in my experience, of teachers and guides is so that you know yourself more.
Right.
With that information and with a kind of skill set,
Mm-hmm.
now you are empowered to navigate the world in a way that's really authentic to you. But for me, there was a time in which it had never even occurred to me that I could be more or less connected to my body.
Right.
It just never had occurred to me. No one had ever said it to me. I'd never
Mm-hmm.
seen anybody who called me to that. It's just
Right.
not a part of life. And then
Right.
one day someone was like, "You're not feeling your body." And I
Right.
thought, huh. And as soon as I realized that, it gave me a direction. It gave me a way to know myself. It empowered
Right.
me.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
these are the kind of teachings, rather than the what do we call them, truths or platitudes, rather than truths that make us feel good, it's capacity and direction that empowers us. This is my goal.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I feel like we have, we have a pandemic of, mind body disease, right? That mind body disconnect. That's, a huge portion of the population has that experience right now. And I feel like that is also too just, the technology that we have, the ability to, tap into so much information, again, all of this information being outside of ourselves. If we went back in the old school teachings where we got rid of all the books, all the videos, all of the, and it was just you and a tree, you would have no other choice but to get to really know yourself well, right? And get that sense of, who am I? What's my identity? What's
Yeah.
this part of me that's feeling all of these different things, right?
Yeah.
Such an interesting time that we live in with all of this. So I know we could probably sit here and go on and on and on because this is interesting and we'll have to expand on that. So how can people connect with you? And of course I'll put all your links and everything so they can follow that. But what's Blaise up to right now? What's your exciting stuff that's happening?
Blaise is in my professional life. Blaise is running a YouTube channel and thinking about how to educate people. I'd love for you to watch my YouTube videos. I'm putting a lot of effort into them and trying to um, express the things that I think are really essential. And so when you listen to me talk about embodiment or soul or awakening or any of these concepts, this is a chance for you to feel what's true for you, not just to hear my words again, but just to see how this lands for you. I would love for people to watch and contemplate my videos. And if you're interested in the work that I do, I meet with people and then I figure out where to place them within my community. And the training programs that I do, or I teach skills and practices that we then utilize. So that would be the other thing, is to be a part of the community or to work with me in general. We meet and then we figure out where you are and create a sort of a skill set that helps you learn how to meet yourself more deeply and meet others more deeply. And then you
That's
can
beautiful.
dive in.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that's, if I had to say to anybody that's the place to start, that's a good place to start for sure. That's awesome. Okay, my friend, again, it's been a pleasure sharing space with you and feeling the energy around everything that you do and that you say. And definitely we will have you back. I'd love to have you back and we can continue our conversations.
Yeah, it's great to be here and feeling the mutual energization of talking about what we care about.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening and watching. And remember to, leave us comments and go and check out Blaise's stuff. And we'll see you guys again. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Collective SOULversations podcast. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen, and we hope that you found our chat both inspiring and thought-provoking. Your support means everything to us, and we're excited to keep this journey going with you. So make sure that you subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so that you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed today's conversation, we'd love for you to leave us a review and share your thoughts in the comments. Your feedback helps us grow and connect with more wonderful listeners like you. Until next time, stay curious and keep those soulversations flowing.